Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I've lived in my current neighborhood for over 15 years. For the most part, it's been peaceful and drama-free. That is, until Karen moved in next door about 6 months ago. From day one, she's been nothing but a huge pain. The first week she lived here, she came pounding on my door at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, yelling that my kids were being too loud playing basketball in our driveway. I calmly explained that it was still morning and they had every right to play outside at that hour. Karen huffed and stomped off. A few days later, I was mowing my lawn in the afternoon when she stormed outside and demanded I stop because the noise was interrupting her nap. I told her nicely that I needed to finish cutting the grass, but would try to be quick. Apparently, that wasn't good enough for her. Karen constantly found ridiculous reasons to scold me and my family. If we parked in front of her house, even just for a few minutes to unload groceries, she'd come flying out the door shouting that we were blocking her view. Anytime music or the TV was audible from outside our house, Karen would call to complain about the disruption to her peace and quiet. She even scolded our kids for playing basketball in our own driveway, claiming the ball was bouncing too loudly for her liking. Her absurd requests and entitled behavior became exhausting. Still, I kept trying to appease her, not wanting to escalate the situation. That approach clearly wasn't working, but I naively thought maybe if I just accommodated her demands, she'd eventually mellow out. Of course, that was wishful thinking when it came to someone like Karen. Things came to a head one Saturday afternoon. My teenage son had a few friends over, and they were out in our backyard playing music, swimming in the pool, and generally just hanging out. It was a beautiful sunny day, perfect for having fun outside. Suddenly, I heard Karen yelling from over the fence, "Turn that horrible racket off right now!" Startled, I went out back to see what was going on. Karen was standing at the fence glowering at the kids, her face red with anger. My son tried to politely explain that they were just playing music and relaxing by the pool. But Karen wouldn't hear it. She went on a tirade about how inconsiderate the kids were being and how she demands peace and quiet in her own backyard. After listening to her berating the poor kids for several minutes, I'd finally had enough. "Karen, you need to stop this," I said firmly. "They are doing nothing wrong. It's the middle of the day on a weekend. They should be allowed to enjoy themselves outside." Well, that set her off even more. She got right in my face, screaming about how rude I was to talk to her that way. "You have no right to speak to me in that tone," she shrieked. "I am just trying to have a pleasant afternoon and they are ruining it. You are an inconsiderate, arrogant jerk." I'll admit, her nasty words pissed me off. After biting my tongue for months, I finally snapped back at her. "No, you are the inconsiderate one," I shouted. "You have done nothing but make unreasonable demands since the day you moved in. We have every right to live our lives normally on our own property without you constantly harassing us." Karen's eyes nearly bulged out of her head. Her face turned an even darker shade of rage-filled red. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "I'm going to call the police right now and have you arrested for being verbally abusive. You'll regret this." And with that, she turned on her heel and stormed off back inside her house. I figured there was no way the cops would actually come for something as minor as a shouting match between quarreling neighbors. Oh, how wrong I was. Not 10 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up outside Karen's house. I watched in dismay as she scurried outside to meet them, frantically waving her arms around as she pointed at me. The officers came over and asked if they could speak with me. I nervously invited them into the backyard, where I recounted the whole ridiculous ordeal. I explained how Karen has been nothing but a nuisance since she moved in, how she constantly makes unreasonable demands, and flies off the handle anytime she hears the slightest noise from our yard. Meanwhile, I overheard Karen on the other side of the fence, going on a tirade about what a dangerous and threatening neighbor I was. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was spinning an absurd story, making me out to be some violent villain terrorizing her for no reason. It was absolutely insane. After I had told my side, one officer said to me rather sternly, "Sir, she is alleging you used verbal threats and profanity against her. We take these kinds of neighbor disputes very seriously." I was flabbergasted. "That is absolutely not true," I protested. "All I did was yell at her to stop harassing our kids. I didn't threaten her or cuss at her at all. You have to believe me." "Regardless, we can't allow shouting matches and foul language between neighbors," the officer replied. I'm going to have to bring you in for disorderly conduct." He then pulled out his handcuffs. My shock turned to utter outrage. I could not believe I was actually being arrested for something completely blown out of proportion by this unhinged woman. As the officer snapped the cuffs on my wrists, I pleaded with him to reconsider. But he and his partner were having none of it. As I was led outside towards the patrol car, I noticed Karen watching gleefully from her front door, looking extremely satisfied. It made my blood boil even more. I truly could not fathom how this woman could make up outright lies to get her harmless neighbor thrown in jail. Who does something so warped and wrong over a minor shouting incident? Down at the police station, I was fingerprinted, photographed, and booked just like a common criminal. All while Karen was surely sitting happily at home, thrilled that I was finally being punished. After a couple hours of processing, I was at least allowed to return home while I awaited my court date. My wife and kids were beside themselves when I told them what happened. Of course, they knew right away Karen had fabricated her claims out of spiteful vengeance. It made them scared to even be outside in their own yard now. We realized we had to get this deranged, vindictive woman out of our neighborhood before she did something even worse. We met with a lawyer to discuss filing a restraining order against Karen. He concurred that her actions were totally disproportionate, and she clearly presented a threat to our safety and security. So I filed a formal restraining order that prohibited Karen from coming within 50 feet of me or my family. I also installed security cameras covering our front and back yards, just in case. At my court date for the bogus disorderly conduct charges, my lawyer presented our evidence and statements. The judge agreed that Karen's testimony seemed unreliable and exaggerated. After I pled my case about her nonstop harassment, the judge dismissed all the charges against me. A few days later, I was thrilled to see a big for sale sign go up outside Karen's house. A month later, she was gone. I have no idea where she moved to, and I don't care. I just feel bad for her new neighbors. Since then, our neighborhood has returned to its peaceful, drama-free ways. And you better believe my family does not hold back about fully enjoying our property anymore. We finally understand that we should never let a deranged, entitled Karen bully us or dictate how we live our lives. She's gone for good, and nothing like that is happening ever again. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Just flipping through a few stories and reading about entitled drivers getting their just desserts. This made me think back to my days as a paramedic. We got a call to a house where there was a bariatric patient who had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 30 stone, 420 pounds. This story isn't really about them, though. There are many reasons people get to this size, and I've never judged, only helped. No, the problem here was a really arrogant neighbor we had come across before, and boy was this chap a judgmental moron. Our patient had a car and had a disabled parking permit. They also had a council-designated disabled parking spot outside their home, which the neighbor kept parking in. There had been a number of letters from the council regarding this, and a number of parking fines just served to annoy this chap even more. On the day of the story, I took the call that the patient had fallen, and we went to the house. Sure enough, the neighbor was not only parked in the disabled spot, but had parked a second car blocking access to the patient's driveway. I assessed the patient and suspected they had a broken hip, so needed to go in. I sent my colleague around to the neighbor to ask them to move the cars, and when they came back, I was told the neighbor had just told my colleague to do one. No problem, time to get the message home. I radioed through to our control center and asked for the fire service and police. We needed the fire service to help lift the guy and the police to do a little parking control. The fire service was the first to arrive, and I spoke to the crew commander to let them know what the situation was. A fireman went to the house to ask the neighbor to move the car and was told the same as my colleague. The message was relayed back, and the watch commander just asked me one question. Is the patient's life at risk? I knew exactly where this was going, and it was time our thoughtless neighbor got the message. My answer was yes, there is equipment I need to get into the house, and the driveway is blocked, preventing me from doing so. The watch commander told the fire truck driver to move those vehicles. It was really satisfying to see both vehicles being pushed down the road by the fire service, and the look on the neighbor's face as he came out spitting and screaming was well worth seeing. His complaints to the police fell on deaf ears. They were well aware of his history of obstruction, and my clinical assessment that the patient's life was in danger was more than enough justification for the vehicles to be moved. I doubt it made our patient's life any easier, and sadly they died a few months later without leaving the hospital, but it really did bring a smile to their face as we wheeled them out. The next one is a petty revenge story. Towards the end of last year, I started talking to a girl I went to high school with. We didn't really stay in touch and are both now 35. She had always had this very outgoing, bubbly personality and a strong Christian faith since I knew her. I was brought up Christian but fell away from it. When we started hanging out, we talked one night about past relationships and how we had both always had bad relationships that ended with the other party cheating, lying, and in her case, she talked about how she was always abused. She actually dated one of my friend's buddies and told me a little bit about that relationship, etc. This will be important later. For once, I felt like I found a woman who understood me and that we had both been through similar pain. She was nothing but nice and caring our whole relationship, always asking about my day, cooking me dinner, running me a bath, giving me massages, and never once did she put me down. She was always trying to build me up any time I was hard on myself. I honestly thought she was too good of a girl for me. In order not to make this super long, let's fast forward to last month when for a week she suddenly became distant. At first she was sick, and I was just giving her space. I had sent her some flowers on a Friday and she was happy to get them. But over the weekend and into the next week, she wasn't really answering my texts or calls. As I said at the time, I thought she just needed space, but in the back of my mind, I did have some thoughts of what if she's seeing someone else or we're about to break up. Throughout our whole relationship, I had full trust in this woman more than I'd ever had in any other. She finally called me the following Friday, and I could tell where it was headed. She said she wanted to find a man of faith, etc., to which I told her that if that's what she wants, then that's what she deserves. We talked for about an hour, and after hanging up, I really wasn't all that upset over it. For me, I felt for once I had an honest and respectful relationship and felt I could finally find that moving forward. She and I just weren't for each other, but at least I had seen that I could find someone who would treat me right in the future. But then all of that turned upside down. However, not more than a week later, I see her post a picture on Facebook with another guy. At first, I thought this had to be an old Facebook account, etc. Well, not only was it not old, but she was also engaged to this guy. At this point, I'm feeling all kinds of emotions. I text her, basically saying that she could have just been upfront with me. She responds saying she's sorry and that she knows this seems crazy, but they had hung out after we broke up, and he confessed his feelings towards her. I couldn't wrap my head around any of this, and she apologized another time or two, and then basically said she wasn't going to keep apologizing, etc., telling me how I should go to church and find God, etc. In one of my heated moments, I decide to leave a comment on her new fiancé's post about them getting engaged, saying, "Funny, we were just in a relationship less than a week ago." She called me the following morning, mad, with her first words being, "Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? You had no right to post that as we were broke up, etc." She still claimed she had never cheated on me or anything. She finally admitted that they were talking while we were together, but she'd known him for 10 years and wasn't going to stop talking to a friend, and that it was never anything bad. I told her she emotionally cheated on me, and she denied it over and over. I was losing my mind and was suicidal for several days, as I couldn't understand this at all. Then 2 days later, I get a message from her fiancé asking if I was in a relationship with X, and that she claims you two never dated and had talked a long time ago. And that was it. At this point, I'm like, what the heck is this serious? She's completely denying my existence at this point. Not to mention, one of her old best friends literally dates my brother, who we'd hung out with while dating, plus we have mutual friends from high school, etc. He asks for proof, so I provide him with text messages, pictures, etc. He was taken aback. He had no idea she was seeing me. He said he'd already caught her in a couple of lies but brushed it off. But basically, he didn't feel he could marry someone who had lied and cheated on the both of us. I felt bad for the guy, as he seems like a really good guy himself. He told me they had started talking on August 7th, and we broke up on August 25th. I also found a picture of them both hanging out on her couch, embraced in a hug, on August 16th. At this point, I'm still trying to put everything together, trying to figure out how this woman who did nothing but treat me well our entire relationship could turn around and deny my existence and basically not even care. The fact that she told me lies and talked about God in the same paragraph just blew me away. Even when confronted with the evidence, she continued claiming she never cheated on me. They're both still moving forward with the marriage. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So I'm one of the bajillions of folks who are afflicted with chronic pain and multiple different things that require medications at different times. It's lame, but I'm glad there are things I can do to help myself. A couple of years ago, I moved in with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, woo, and had to transfer pharmacies. The closest place to our new house was a pretty low-traffic major generic pharmacy, so I figured, cool, that's easy. I work from home, and I can pop in during the daytime and pick up my meds. Mostly this works out. I need to pick up maybe 3 or 4 prescriptions per month, and it usually goes exactly according to plan with a minimum of fuss, except when it came to my Humira. For those unaware, Humira is an immunosuppressant that you can use to combat things like psoriasis, but in my case it was to help lower my immune system that seemed hell-bent on ravaging my spine. Very mainstream medication. If you live in the US, you've likely seen the terrifying ads on a regular basis. I'd been taking it for years. They have a handy auto-injector pen that makes it virtually painless and easy to take. So I was very confused when I picked up my first prescription from the new pharmacy, and it was a bottle of the medication with a simple syringe provided. Not a huge deal, I could make it work, but it hurts a heck of a lot more to inject that into my stomach than it does to use the pen. So I asked the pharmacist about it. She had no clue what I was talking about, despite the fact that my rheumatologist's script clearly said injector pen on it. I tried to tell her what was happening, but she said she was too busy, and if in the future I didn't get the injector pen, just don't pay for the script and send it back. So a month went by, and I ordered my prescription again, making sure to call in and request over the phone that I have the pen instead of the syringe. I went and picked up my order. They're visually identical unless you open them up. And before paying for anything, I opened it up and saw that it was the syringe again. I turned to the tech and asked him to send it back and reorder the injector pen for me. The pharmacist came out in a huff immediately, demanding to know why I had opened a product that I didn't intend to accept. I told her, that was literally what it was the same pharmacist, told me to do last month. You said to check it before accepting, so that's what I did. She was agog for a moment. The open box of Humira was going to cost her pharmacy over $4,000. The American healthcare system is so damn stupid. But she then remembered our conversation. I'm extremely tall, so I stick out, I think, and grumbled and shuffled back to her pill lair. I now get my Humira prescription from a different pharmacy that's a good 1-minute drive farther away, but I still use that pharmacy for most of my needs. The next one is an entitled people story. Let's start from there. There are 4 people living in the family: my aunt, my grandmother, and my 2 cousins, EC, 14, and GC, 11. I am a 16-year-old boy. They live 15 minutes away from my house. Well, I had just woken up and I was lying on the bed scrolling TikTok when I got a call from my aunt. I answered, and she told me that Luke was not at home, neither was she, and Nika had broken his right hand and was afraid of falling or something. It is quite a big dog and it could easily have happened. Without even thinking, I told her that I would walk the dog because I have walked their dog many times, and I respect my grandmother and I know it would be inappropriate for me to refuse. Too many times I didn't walk my dog and went down to their house, whether it's been raining, heat waves, stormy, or just I was feeling plain lazy, and yet I've never refused. I got up, got ready, and my mother was making a new dish, and I was hungry, so I sat down to eat and went to their place. My dad asked me to buy our dog food, so I also did that. All this took exactly 40 minutes, and I went down to their place with quick steps. I got there. And oh my goodness, Luca with only his underwear is lying in front of the TV and watching. My grandmother is fussing in the kitchen and Nika is in his room. Luke rudely told me that the dog had already been taken out, so I was surprised because Luke wasn't dressed, and my grandmother is too old to take him out. I got up and went into Nika's room and asked who took the dog out. I was told by an 11-year-old crippled child who is barely a kilo of a dog that he took the dog for a walk. It got on my nerves because Luke was at home, my aunt lied to me, and Luke scored with his laziness. He has done this many times, complained to his mother about taking the dog out, and in the end, they washed their hands on me. 2 days passed, and I was with my grandmother. My aunt met me on the way out. I was with my friends and my girlfriend, and she said the following thing to me. Couldn't you have come a little earlier? What a behavior. It's like it's my fault that her son was sitting on his ass, and I was obliged to take him for a walk when, I repeat, Luke was at home doing nothing, and he just got lazy, and I, who live 15 minutes away, had to go out on my errands and still got up and went down. I would have understood if I tossed them away. I have never asked anyone to walk my dog from that family, and even if I asked, no one would ever agree. However, I don't understand why they ask me to walk the dog, why they insult me, and why they have complaints. I didn't ask for that dog, and whoever did should take responsibility. I just had enough respect to not reject them and actually wanted to help out, and they don't even respect me for that. I do not know what to do. She totally embarrassed me, and I feel really mad at Luke for pulling. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.